We've all been there, right? That feeling of just red-hot anger that completely takes over, and it feels impossible to think straight. It's such a powerful and, honestly, a really destructive emotion. But what if you could actually get control back and take that anger apart in just a few minutes? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. It's a simple, powerful technique designed to do exactly that.
So this whole idea really comes from a story about these two business partners. They built a shop together, they started making money, and then the whole thing just fell apart. You see, they never set any clear terms, so these tiny little disagreements just festered and grew into this full-blown fury. Each of them was convinced the other had betrayed them, and that anger just consumed them until their business, their friendship, everything was totally ruined. It's a classic example of how anger can destroy everything if we don't have a plan.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to look at that story, and then I'll introduce you to this core idea, the 5-minute rule. After that, we'll break down two really specific methods, one for when a person is making you angry, and another for when it's a situation. And then we'll wrap it all up with how you can turn this into a skill you can actually use. Yeah, that story about the business partners, it's more than just a story. It's a warning. Without some kind of method to manage your anger, we just naturally fall into this awful cycle of blame and frustration and just tormenting ourselves. We can't focus, we can't solve anything, and we usually just end up making everything a whole lot worse.
So the big question is, how do we break that cycle? Well, it all comes down to a really simple two-step method. And honestly, the most critical part of this entire process is the very first step. If you can get that right, everything else just kind of falls into place.
All right, here are the 2 steps in their simplest form. First, you just commit to giving yourself 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes before you react. Second, you use that time to figure out the true source of your anger.
Let's dig into that first step, because it's the most important. That's the magic number, 5 minutes. It doesn't matter how furious you are or how totally justified you feel in that moment. You just make a deal with yourself. I will not act for 5 minutes. After that, if you still want to yell or, punch a wall, that's your call. But first, you have to commit to those 5 minutes. That simple promise to just pause is everything. And look, this isn't about trying to bury your anger or pretend it isn't there. It's about creating a little bit of space between the thing that happened and how you react. That pause, it's like a circuit breaker. It stops that emotional overload and it gives your rational brain a chance to come back online. And that prepares you for step 2.
Okay, so you've taken your 5 minutes. Now what? Well, now we analyze the source, and the method we use depends on what it is. Let's start with the first scenario, which is when a specific person that you know is the source of your anger.
This is a really powerful psychological trick. You just sit down, close your eyes, and get a clear picture of the face of the person who made you angry. See them clearly in your mind. Then, you slowly start to mentally push their image away from you, further and further and further, until they just get smaller and smaller and eventually shrink into a tiny, insignificant little dot.
And as you're shrinking their image down to nothing, you repeat this mantra to yourself. You're reclaiming your mental space. And look, this isn't magic. It's a way to psychologically slash the power that person has over your emotions. You're using your own mind to take back control.
But what if the source of your anger isn't a person you know? What if it's a stranger, or just a really frustrating situation, or even an object? Well, in that case, the visualization trick isn't going to work. We need a different approach, something more analytical.
And this is the crucial question, right? What do you do when there's no specific person to mentally push away? The feeling of anger is just as real, but the source is totally different. For this, you're going to need a pen and a piece of paper. The process here is all about facing the problem head-on instead of just stewing in it. So you start by writing down exactly what happened and why you're so mad. Then you have to challenge that story. You question it. You search for other reasons, other contributing factors. And finally, you draw a rational conclusion based on all the evidence, not just your initial angry reaction. So let's use a classic, absolutely infuriating example. You're at a coffee shop. Your laptop battery is dead, so you have to be plugged in. You're deep in your work, you haven't saved, and some stranger just unplugs your cord without asking. Boom! Everything's gone. The rage is just instant. Okay, so you take out your piece of paper. You write down their fault. They unplug the cord without asking. And yeah, that's true. But then you force yourself to ask, are there any other reasons this happened? And then you start writing, well, my laptop has a dead battery. I forgot to save my work.
I plugged into a really crowded outlet. I saw them walk up and I didn't say anything. All of a sudden, the picture gets way more complex.
And when you actually lay it all out like this, the conclusion is kind of shocking. The stranger's action, that was just the final trigger. Maybe what, 20% of the problem? When you really look at it, you realize that most of the problem, we're talking 80%, and therefore the power to solve it was in your hands the entire time.
And that realization changes everything. Your anger at the stranger just dissolves because you see it's completely misplaced. The real productive solution isn't to yell at them, it's to go buy a new battery for your laptop. By fixing the root cause, you not only solve the problem right now, but you prevent that specific type of anger from ever happening to you again.
Now, I have to be honest, neither of these techniques is going to feel natural at first. Managing anger isn't a magic trick, it's a skill. And just like any other skill worth having, it takes practice. You have to work at it to move from it being this conscious, kind of difficult thing to an automatic, ingrained habit.
Ultimately, this is what we're aiming for. This is the core of emotional regulation. It's not about never feeling angry again. That's not going to happen. It's about recognizing it when it starts to bubble up, hitting that 5-minute pause button, and then choosing a productive way to deal with the situation instead of letting the emotion deal with you.
And here's maybe the most important tip for making this work in the real world. Do not wait for a full-blown crisis to try this for the first time. Practice when you're calm. Think back to a time you got really angry and just walk through the steps in your head. Rehearsing these methods when you're rational builds the mental muscle you're going to need when you're not.
So let's just recap the whole thing. That 5-minute pause, that's the non-negotiable first step. If a person is the problem, use that visualization technique to diminish their power over you. If it's an event or a situation, use the analytical method to find your own role and the real solution. And most importantly, practice all this when you're calm to build that lasting self-control.
And that leaves us with one final, and I think really empowering thought. This isn't just about managing anger in the moment. It's about preventing it in the future. By analyzing why you get angry, you can start fixing the root causes in your life. So the real question is, what anger is waiting for you down the road that you can dismantle right now?